Let's get started. As we typically do, these build release webinars are broken out by areas of functionality in InfoBurst Enterprise and also InfoBurst Dash. So this first set of enhancements regards the UI, the user interface that we all use every day. So the first enhancement, very minor enhancement, but one that folks have been asking for, is a sorted parameter alias list. Use of parameter aliases has started to become more popular. These lists have started to grow, and before 1.22 this list was not alphabetized, so it did make locating aliases a bit more difficult. So you'll now find with the 1.22 update that this list is sorted alphabetically. This next enhancement to the UI regards the database connection. If you use bursting or XDC in InfoBurst, I'd say builds 1.18 and later, you'll notice that in the burst and XDC UI there's a summary button that if you click it, you're able to download a PDF summary of that object. So for the burst and the XDC, you get all of the configuration details of that object, maybe for auditing purposes or support purposes. That option is now available for the database query. As many of you know, we can form database connections as an object in the user interface, and against that connection we can write queries for things like bursting lists of values, email addresses for deliveries, maybe data for XDC's data caches. So we can now dump out the anatomy, the details of that connection and all of its queries in PDF formats. Let me just show you what that looks like in the user interface. So we'll log in here, and I've got a database connection pre-built, this one here called sample. So if we drill into the database connection, you'll now see the summary button. Now if you've never used this, it's not a one-click option. What you do is you click summary, and you'll notice that you've got a little status there called generating. That's InfoBurst creating the PDF in the background. Once it's generated, you get another little prompt saying click to save the summary. So if you click it again, you'll be prompted to download that resulting PDF file. Okay, that's saved. And then what we'll do here is we'll just go over, open that up, just show you what that looks like. So if you've not used the summaries before, this is what it looks like, a little preview or title page. And then every section of the object is detailed. So we have our object ID, our connection details, and then every query in the connection is also detailed. So we can see the name, the actual SQL query. Then we can see any columns returned by the query and their data format, which might be useful for data caching purposes. So that's the new database connection summary option. Okay. The next enhancement, UI related, is the InfoBurst LaunchPad. Traditionally, users, when browsing to the InfoBurst user interface, InfoBurst website, you'll typically enter an address that looks like this. So it's InfoBurst server name, or maybe a domain. Port 8551 is the default UI port, and then it would be a /InfoBurst, get you to the UI. And in builds past, if you happen to leave off the /InfoBurst, that root URL would also take you to the UI. But the InfoBurst platform is growing by leaps and bounds these days, and there are a variety of new endpoints available to us for different features of the platform that aren't necessarily related to the main user interface. So you can find access to these utilities and tools tucked away in different folders and menus. We thought we'd make it a little easier to find these utilities. So if you go to the root URL now, so no /InfoBurst, just server and port, you'll be taken to the new InfoBurst LaunchPad, and I'll actually show you that. So I'm just going to take the root URL there and copy that into a new browser. And you'll now see this. This is the InfoBurst LaunchPad. So, here we can get to the main user interface. We can get to the setup UI. If you've not seen this, this is more of an administrative screen where we can form our connections to repositories and manipulate certain system settings. Things like our apps launchpad, if you happen to be a user of InfoBurst HTML5 apps, there's an interface to that. This is don't be confused by this help. This help is a UI. It's UI documentation for our JavaScript developers. So the help, if you will, for InfoBurst is still the InfoBurst wiki. We are considering incorporating documentation into the product itself. That's something that we're hoping to achieve. For now, still go to the wiki for all of your documentation and troubleshooting. And then you'll find other endpoints and utilities, ability to monitor system throughput, the InfoBurst shell for those that use the command line interface, and that sort of thing. And you'll see this list grow. We're constantly adding new utilities to the system, most of them geared towards either the HTML5 apps or system administration and configuration. So that's server name, port 8551 will get you to that new Launchpad. The next UI change regards the burst. The burst UI doesn't change much, but we made a small change to the UI, hopefully to maximize workspace in the burst. So we're finding that we have users of InfoBurst that have long lists of documents. I actually stumbled across an InfoBurst customer recently that had 110 documents in a single burst. So the documents window there, it's kind of grayed out, was, it's relatively small. So if you had a large number of documents, you were doing a lot of scrolling. So what we did is we didn't remove the description field. We give you the ability to toggle it on and off as a pop-up window. So that description box was fairly large. We've eliminated that now to give you just a little bit more real estate in the actual documents section of the burst. So if we drill into a burst here, so this window is just a bit larger, not as large as we'd like, but within this space it's as big as we can get it, and hopefully that'll give you a little more flexibility with large numbers of documents. And right here next to the name field you'll see this little notebook icon. That's the description. It's toggled off by default, so just click it. It'll pop open the description field. You can then make edits if you like, make a little change like that, and then you just need to save the change to the burst. So the description field's still there, just hit the little notepad button to toggle it on and off. The next set of enhancements regard report bursting or document processing. The first one, BI4, that's 4.0, SP6 support is included in build 122. You'll notice it as the only version of 4.0. If you're not using 4.0 yet, with prior builds of business or versions of Business Objects, XI3 for example, you would see a platform entry for version for every version of, or every service pack of XI3. It doesn't work like that in BI4. BI4 is a subtly different animal that way. So what we do whenever we ship a build of InfoBurst, we always ship the latest service pack files. And by that I mean there are certain libraries that we ship that are Business Objects libraries that we use to make a connection to Business Objects. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use older versions of older service packs of BI4. There is a process that BI4 users have to follow. If you're using BI4, you're familiar with this. It's called file syncing, where you simply go out and get your BO files to sync in InfoBurst so that our client files are the equivalent of your service pack and not the one that we ship. You can find that process under the Setup and Administration section of the InfoBurst Wiki. It's very simple. It's just something you have to do whenever you run an update. So just a little bit about SP6. We talked about this in our last webinar. SP6, and we'll talk about SP7 in a second, includes the new, what's called the RESTful SDK. For the most part, most InfoBurst users wouldn't ever know how InfoBurst connects to business objects, but this change is rather important because what's happened over the course of the last few years. InfoBurst always interacted with business objects through their .NET SDKs. InfoBurst is a .NET application, so XI3, XIR2, and before, we leveraged that .NET SDK. Well, the .NET SDK was not carried forward into BI 4.0, so we essentially created a bridge to the BI4 Java SDK. This is a kind of a client SDK that we had to develop so that we can connect to BI4. Now, and that's fine, and 4.0 users have been utilizing that Java bridge. But what SAP have been working on and finally released is their new RESTful SDK. This is a brand new SDK that we've been looking forward to. It's now available in SP6. So users of SP6 and later, and by that I mean SP6 and upcoming, or SP7, 4.1, users will have a choice to use Java, you can see it here, the Java SDK or the Java connection, or what's called the web service connection. Now, if you're a 4.0 user, we'll continue to default to the Java, kind of mitigate any issues regarding the change. But if you're new to the product and come into 4.1, we will default you to the web service. Now, what I'll say about that is that we've had some InfoBurst users doing field testing using the web service connection, and all the feedback we're getting is positive. Our own internal testing is positive. By that I mean it's functional. We haven't found any significant breaking issues, so it's a stable SDK, and more importantly, it is significantly faster than any SDK that we've seen before. I just ran a burst before today's session, and that was a burst that under the Java connection would typically run about 25-30 seconds. That burst now runs in 10 seconds. Now, on the InfoBurst side of things, our processes are fairly light and we get through those quickly, but the bulk of a burst is always the processing in the BO environment. One of our customers in Europe was doing some tests of bursts that were running, I'd say, in excess of 20 minutes, and those bursts are now running in just a few minutes. So very impressed with performance so far. So, if you're on SP6 or later, or getting ready to move to 4.1, consider the web service connection. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to ask us. But I think for those of you that are, have time constraints with your jobs, with your bursts and XDCs that go against business objects, it's a good option to consider. I think you'll see a really nice boost in performance. So the last bullet point there, SP7. Let's see, we've got a quick question there. I just want to make sure it's okay. Sorry about that. I was just checking the panel. So yeah, I noticed somebody submitted a question. I'm going to hold all the questions till the end just to keep things going, but we will get to all of the questions. I see there. Mr. Yee is on the line. Eric will get to that question. So let's so SP7. A bit of a timing issue there. We were just a few weeks from releasing the general release of 122 when SP7 was released. Now, normally, we like to have a bit of time to do testing to ensure that these new service packs don't adversely affect the SDK that we use. But we know we have a couple of users that are eager to get onto SP7. So we did some preliminary testing, and what we can say is that service pack doesn't look to have any major breaking issues. Although 122 officially supports SP6, you can use it against SP7. It is supported. It is validated. but there are no changes that we think will keep you from using it. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out and contact us. But so long as you do your BI4 file syncing, taking your SP7 files and syncing them into InfoBurst, you'll be able to use SP7. We just missed the cutoff there for kind of official support. And we'll talk about official SP7 support and BI 4.1 support in just a bit. Okay, the next change regarding burst processing or report processing is support for the new XLSX Service Pack 6. Okay, so the next change regarding bursts document processing is the ability to customize the document instance name within the burst. So this is something that users who use many instances of the same report in the burst have been requesting. And it's nice to be able to identify what document represents what job, essentially. I'll show you this in just a second. So you can change the name of the instance in the burst. This does not affect the name of the actual object in InfoBurst, the report, just the instance name. It's like a label in the burst. So you can uniquely identify the instances. You can also leverage the doc iname macro. That means document instance name. So if you want to use the instance name to create a custom file name or folder name, that's the macro you'd use. So it's going to use your custom name versus the original document name. Let me just show you what that looks like in the user interface here. So what I'll do here is I'll add just a few instances of the same report to a burst. And there are many use cases for this. Let's just build this. We'll call this instance name. So let's say in this scenario I have 2 state reports, and for the first instance my requirement is to burst for, let's say, a list of western states and then ship all those western states reports off to those recipients. Let's say in the second instance I want to run them for a list of eastern states and do something else with those. So without the instance name option, you wouldn't know which document performed which task. So what we can do here, you'll notice a new radial, unique custom name. If we click the radial and hover over the document, you'll now see this little pencil icon. So if we open that up, we can say, let's say this will be our Western States burst. We'll save that change. And if we hover over the second instance, let's say this is our Eastern States burst. Okay. Very straightforward. Use the instance names if it makes sense to you, and also leverage the doc iname macro to get these instance names into resulting file names. Okay, this next round of enhancements regards publishing. The first is support for the XLSX format that's now available in BI4. So for BI4 Webl reports, it's now possible to optionally publish those as XLSX. The default will be the traditional XLS format. So when you select the format in the delivery and you want XLSX, you'll select this output as XL 2007 option. So this next change is really what I consider the most significant change in build 122. And hopefully I'll show you a few examples that inform you about what's possible with what we call content grouping. I know there are many users out there that are leveraging or starting to leverage content grouping because it's something that was conceived a few years back, and it had a very simple implementation. It's now become a very robust feature of the product and something that a lot of sites are utilizing. So essentially it's the ability to take content produced from a burst, So maybe you have multiple reports. The type doesn't matter. I could have Webby and Crystal and Microsoft Reporting Services, whatever makes up your burst, and then produce those reports in a common format like PDF and Excel, and then group those resulting files into a single file. So you can imagine I might have 5 different reports in a burst, and I can take PDF from all of those different reports and group them into a single file and deliver that to a user. So they get one file, PDF or Excel, that has all of the various reports that they're receiving from the burst in it. So very tidy way to deliver the report content. So this enhancement regards that content grouping, and specifically Excel. So we had a few users that were using content grouping, and they were trying to do things with content grouping that logically should work, but we never actually designed the feature to do. So, traditionally content grouping was about taking content from multiple reports and merging it into one file. What these users were trying to do was burst a single report to produce multiple reports with different data, and then merge those single reports from that single document back into a single Excel or PDF file, which you could do, but in the case of Excel, there was no, essentially what you see there, every tab name in the file is named for the equivalent report tab name in the report, like the Webby report, but they weren't individualized, so you wouldn't know which tabs represented which data. So, for example, first set of tabs represent the Los Angeles report, second the San Francisco. So that's the change that's been made here. It's the ability to uniquely name these tabs, and also to control the name of these tabs when creating these grouped Excel files. Let me show you a few examples of this, and hopefully that'll make a bit more sense to you. Let's go back to InfoBurst here. I was going to run these for you. I was running a few tests right before today's webinar, and of course my brand new 4.1 environment is on the fritz. So we don't need to run these. I'll show you what the burst looks like, and then we'll take a look at the output. So this is the first example, the most simple example. We have a single report, and we're going to burst it on a parameter state for multiple values, just a few values here for demo purposes. So this report, this performance by state, this Webby report, has 3 different tabs. So when I burst by California, I'm going to get 3 different Excel files, each representing a different tab, and then for the next value, Texas, I get the same result. So without grouping, we'd end up with several Excel files. So we're going to burst, and then what we want to do is take those bursted pieces and group them back into a single Excel and deliver that to a user. So to do that, we're in here, the burst properties under content grouping. Our grouping type is Excel, format is Excel, and we're grouping at a burst level. So here, because there's only one report and only one bursting parameter state, we're just saying take everything that comes out of that burst, group it back into one Excel file. So we're grouping by burst. And then we're just sending it out to a network share with a path here, nothing else. So if we come over here, there we go. So the burst we were just looking at was delivered to this state grouping folder, and we got a single file. By default, these grouped files are labeled with the name of the burst, but you can control the name of the grouped file just as you control other output from InfoBurst. If we open that up, you'll notice that we have a single Excel file. So the report has 3 tabs, so these first 3 tabs are for the California slice of the document. So here are my 3 tabs. The next is for the Texas slice of the document. So this is handy if you're bursting reports, but a recipient is receiving more than one set of bursted reports. Without that, maybe grouping is not necessary, but in this case, I might be receiving a dozen. I could get them all in a single Excel file and be able to differentiate by these tab names what tabs represent what data. So that's the first example. Let's take a look at a more elegant example of this. And again, this was inspired by one of our users. I actually think she's on the call today. You know who you are. Let's go back over here. So I've got a second burst, state-city grouping. So this example is a little more typical, where we're bursting at multiple levels. So we have a parameter for state, and then we have a parameter for state on which we're going to multi-pass burst. So we're going to refresh for California, then we're going to filter for city. So the goal ultimately is to produce unique city files for a given state. So we're bursting at two levels. So the first level is this state parameter, and I'm actually controlling that here at the document source level, and we're controlling this with a multi-column list. So you'll see here I've got all of my state values, all of my corresponding city values, but this could be a database query, it could be an Excel file. And I've applied that as my source, so that this column will control the parameter. Then I've added a city filter. So as I said, we'll do a multi-pass. We're going to refresh for the state, and then filter the resulting data for cities, and then we'll move on to the next state and filter that. So the idea here is that we want to, instead of delivering a bunch of unique city reports to a user, let's say I'm receiving state California, I'm going to get a single Excel file grouped for the state that includes all of the resulting city reports in a single Excel file. So if we go in here to the content grouping, again at the Excel Format tab, this time we're grouping by variable because there are multiple variables in play, state and city. So we're saying group at the first level, which is state. There's where we define our grouping variable. Then, because there are multiple variables, we do need to tell InfoBurst how to name the tab, because it's going to try to name with a value, but because there are multiple multiple variables, we want it to name it at the city level. So I'm doing a few things here. I've got my parameter macro, good old parameter macro for city, but I'm also using this new macro. This is the XL tab macro. So in this case, I do want to persist the name of the tab because there are multiple tabs for every report. So I'm still including that, and then a little delimiter, and then the city value. Oh, and I'm also I'm controlling the name of the grouped file with the state value. So we'll just get an Excel file labeled Arizona or California or whatever we've got. And this is the result. So here in the state city grouping folder, so we bursted for two states. So we got our California and our Texas. And if we drill into the state report, we then have grouped together all of the cities for which we filtered that state data. So again, it's a 3-tab report. So we got summary, detail, and margin versus revenue for Austin, and then the same for Dallas, and so on and so forth. So if you use grouping and require Excel format, look into this. Hopefully you'll find it useful. Several sites have been requesting this, and I think they're utilizing it or plan to utilize it quite heavily. And you know, like the rest of the product, you know, these changes were inspired by the users. So if there are things that you're trying to achieve in InfoBurst that make sense for the tool, please don't hesitate to let us know. You know, you can always contact us through support. I'll talk a little bit later about our annual user group conference, where we do have a, you know, a very, you know, kind of a one-on-one user and development group session, and users are invited to give us their ideas to influence development of the product. Okay, let's move on then. So that's content grouping and custom Excel tab naming. This next one regards file compression at the burst level. So as you may know, when you create a delivery in InfoBurst, you have the ability to optionally compress the output into a zip file and then optionally password protect it. That's at the delivery level. You've also had the ability to group at a burst level when delivering to email recipients. The only thing that was missing there was the ability to customize the zip name at the burst level, which you've always been able to do at the delivery level. You can now control that zip name here. And that's under the burst properties and the email options section of the burst. Okay. This next one regards Crystal. All we've added is the ability to output Crystal Excel as CSV. You've got this option with other formats. It's now available for Crystal, so when you create your form or your delivery for the Crystal report, you can say output as Excel, which will give you the XLS, or output as CSV, where you have all of your options to customize delimiters, turn on and off headers, change the extension, that sort of thing. Okay, this next section, very quick, just a few changes to or enhancements to deliveries. The first one is support for SharePoint 2013. So it's kind of a catch-all when you create the platform. You just select SharePoint, and the 2007 to 2013 just means we support all versions, basically all current versions of SharePoint. And then the delivery template has been enhanced to include support for the use of XI categories. That means that when you create the template, you can select a BO platform, and then from that platform select what categories will ultimately be assigned to documents that are delivered to that platform using the template. Just a minor enhancement there. Only one real significant change in the area of XDC and dashboards. This one is a bit of inside baseball. We've got many users that use XDC in very creative and complex ways. And so catering for those use cases can be very challenging at times, and this was one of those challenges. So we have many users that create caches using crosstabs, and these crosstabs can come from Excel files or Web Intelligence reports, where those crosstabs are not traditional, one column row, one row header row kind of crosstab. These are very complex crosstabs, so the crosstabs might have many header rows. The challenge is that XDC, the cache, is designed to be queried. It's a table, and if you create a cache where the block, the crosstab, contains multiple header rows, InfoBurst doesn't know on which header row to query the data. Which row is actually the header row, which will control the query, the select, and will also dictate the data type, because I might have a header row that is string, maybe month, and I might have another header row that's a date or a number. So you can now control that. If you have multiple header row crosstabs in your cache, when you add that part, that table to the cache, if you click on the optimizations little button there, a new section of the optimization is the ability to tell InfoBurst how many header rows exist. So I have 3 header rows, and the header row for cache query is 1 or 2 or 3. So you can now define that, and those multiple header row crosstabs will now function successfully in the cache query. Okay, next on to scheduling enhancements. DB query event parameters. So we've always had the database query event. So the idea is we'll create this event, and a query will run on some sort of interval. So here it's 30 minutes or however often we want to check. So every 30 minutes we run the query, and when the true value is detected or returned, that will in turn trigger a schedule. We had some users saying that their queries, their read and reset queries, required parameters, so you'll now find parameter fields for both the read query and the reset query in the DB query event. Now those are static. You can type in your parameter values. These fields do not at the moment accept macros, InfoBurst macros. Start schedule action. So the action, just as a reminder, is something that you can do based on the status of the job, and by the job I mean the XDC, the burst, or the schedule that contains XDCs and bursts. So based on that status, we can go out and perform an action like send an email, create a trigger file, run a query. There are a whole slew of actions that you can conduct and execute based on status. And there are two of those that came before this, the ability to start a burst or start an XDC. So kind of a cascading scenario. I'm going to schedule burst 1 to run at 8 a.m., but I don't want burst 2 to run until burst 1 is completed. I could run the first one on a schedule, then employ a start burst action to say, okay, only when the first burst completes, kick off the second, maybe I want to kick off a third, and that sort of scenario. I can do the same thing with XDCs. I can now do that with a schedule. So if I have a schedule that has many bursts, we can run that, and only when that schedule is done will we kick off another schedule that contains maybe multiple bursts. So the start schedule action is now available. This next rounds of changes regards the platform, kind of server level, system level changes. And this is just a series of bullet points. Platform enhancements include the use of CUID in addition to doc ID when we catalog a report. Few sites were requesting this, and their scenario was this. They would, in their business objects environment, they would routinely promote documents from dev to prod. And when they did this, the doc ID that we used changed. That meant that if InfoBurst was already pointing at those documents in production, that change would break the burst because the ID is different. And you can fix that with InfoBurst. There's what's called platform validation, which will detect the new ID number and fix up all the bursts. But what didn't change is the CUID, or the cluster unique ID. So when they move that document, the doc ID would change. CUID is the same. So InfoBurst will now store both the doc ID and the CUID. And so if it goes to, if you migrate your report in BO and we detect a change of the doc ID, we'll also look at the CUID. If it's a match, then it will just work. There's nothing you have to change in InfoBurst to make that work. This is a very seamless thing. You won't see this in InfoBurst. It's just another bit of metadata that we collect to make that sort of scenario a little bit more seamless for you. Active Directory Sync. We've got a few customers using this. Or users using this. This was introduced in Build 121, and it's the ability to create InfoBurst user groups from an Active Directory group. So in essence, you can sync up InfoBurst to Active Directory, and all of your groups are all your users and groups are created that way, and then when users are disabled in Active Directory, those changes will proliferate to InfoBurst and disable those users. All we've done here is add support for multiple domains, so you can connect to multiple AD environments across domain, and you can also search AD groups for specific users. Platform migration, this is the ability to change an existing platform and its documents from one version of business objects to another. So I'm moving from XI3 to BI4. You can go through this process to update the platform and repoint it to the new BI4 environment. And we had users that were moving from the XI3 Desky world to the BI4 Webby world. There's also an option in platform migration to change document type from XI3 Desky to BI4 Webby without having to recreate bursts and that sort of thing. That ability, that feature of platform validation platform migration has now been extended to XIR2. So if you're moving from an XIR2 environment to a later version of business objects, you can now do that. And also if you're moving from XIR2 Desky to Webby in a later version, you can do that as well. All that information, as with all the features, that can be found in the wiki. If you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to reach out to us via support. Okay, so Build 122 is general release. It was actually released yesterday to the website. you should have gotten an email notification of its availability. So just go to support.infosol.com, log in, and you'll find 122 under the download section. All the build release notes, all the details of the build, I've left out quite a bit for time's sake, a lot of very minor enhancements and changes. You can learn all about those in the release notes. Those are available in the support wiki under the software updates section. So if you drill in there, you'll see a list of all the different builds that we've released, and then you can drill into the respective release notes. Just a reminder, when you're running an update of an older InfoBurst environment, just take care to back things up, back up your repository, back up your application root, run your update. That way, should anything go wrong, you can easily recover. The backup instructions, very straightforward. They're available in the wiki under software updates in a section called applying an update. It just gives you several quick bullet points on what to do to back up an environment before you run an update. And just remember, and some folks will fall afoul of this, you'll always find two files in there. You'll find a full installation executable, and you'll find an update executable. If you're updating an existing environment, don't try to run the full install. Make sure you grab the updates, labeled update, grab the update file, run that. Okay. Build 123 preview. We'll normally try to at least talk about what's coming up in a new build, but this next build, 123, is rather unique for us. Our build cycles are typically about quarterly, anywhere between 3 and 4 months of development and RC testing by our users, and then we'll go general release. However, because of the timing of the SP7 and BI4 SP7 and 4.1 release, we plan to shorten the dev cycle significantly for build 123 so that we can support those of you that are moving in the short term to SP7 or 4.1. So 123 will be not very limited, but it will focus on some specific areas of functionality that support for SP7 and 4.1. It will also include, for you XDC dashboard users, HTML5 compatible suite of connectors. So if you plan to use the new HTML5 conversion option in dashboards 4.1, this is where you can take a dashboard or XLSX designed dashboard, which is a Flash object, and convert that to HTML5 for consumption on BI Mobile. Our connectors in build 123 will now support this. So full compatibility. If your dashboards are cache connected, you can convert them and they will function as designed. And then we'll see there's just a few enhancements around what's called parameter LOV validation, and this is really just bringing these options in line across all platforms and all bursting types. So we are targeting end of October. We plan to release build 123 the last week of October, so just about 5-6 weeks from now we'll get this build out the door. And again, we're really looking to just support those SP7 and 4.1 users quickly here. The 124 cycle will be more traditional, probably have many more enhancements that folks are asking for. And that one, very roughly we're targeting end of January for build 124. So I want to talk just a slide or two here about InfoBurst User Community. The InfoBurst User Community, if you will, has been growing rather rapidly lately. I think we have well over 200 sites now worldwide using InfoBurst, and it's a really tight-knit community. It's a community based around a product that's rather diverse, a lot of different use cases, and so we've seen a lot of requests for opportunities to collaborate, user group meetings, online presence, that sort of thing. So we're seeing this grow kind of organically, and we want to promote that. And there are several ways for InfoBurst users to interact and collaborate, interact with our team. And those include the InfoBurst LinkedIn group. So you'll find the InfoBurst User Community on LinkedIn. If you're a member of LinkedIn and you're not a member of this group, just log into LinkedIn, search the groups for InfoBurst. It's the only one there, and then request to join. I think we've got a pretty nice group of users in there so far, and that group's growing every day. A lot of collaboration going on there. You know, our team, the developers, will get in there and interact with the users. It's a nice place to collaborate. So you know, join that group if you're interested. As always, you can follow InfoBurst on Twitter. You know, we'll make you know, any announcements, build releases, features, upcoming events. All that will make its way onto our Twitter feed. And we want to start really encouraging you to participate in the InfoBurst forum. And this is a forum that exists on the InfoSol support website. So when you log into support, you've got three options: your support calls, your downloads, and your forum. And we've seen a lot of InfoBurst Enterprise and Dash customers involved there lately, asking questions, answering questions of other users, and collaborating as you would in a forum. And we just wanted to encourage that. You're going to see a lot more interaction and updates from the InfoBurst support and development team there. We'd like to start getting a lot more information out there available to you in the form of a forum. The information is still going to be available in the wiki, but this forum's public, a lot more searchable. So you'll see more and more from us about using the forums and upcoming enhancements to the actual site and the forums themselves. Then lastly, attend the InfoBurst User Conference in 2014. So the iBUC conference has been announced. Save the date. It is June 16th through 18th in Carlsbad, California, and it's at the Park Hyatt Aviara Resort. This is a cliffside, beautiful resort. For those of you that attended this year's conference in San Diego, you know, it was the first InfoBurst user conference that we've held. We were very impressed. Got a great group of users attending. It was a week of really interesting collaboration, user case studies, hands-on workshops covering some very advanced features of the product. We had a number of very interesting one-on-one meetings with the users. We had, you know, the development roadmap meeting. The user influence was great. That was kind of a standing room only where users were telling us what they wanted in the product. So more of that at the 2014 conference. We're going to be adding even more content and workshops. But if you didn't get a chance to attend in San Diego this year, it's in Carlsbad. At this point, we have the dates. We don't have a firm agenda set, but that will be upcoming in the next several months, and we'll make sure to get that out to you so that you can get a better idea of what we're doing at the conference. But I just wanted to make sure you're all aware that those dates have been set June of 2014. Okay, so at this point, let's move on to questions. I'm going to just a second here, see if we can't get this questions window a bit bigger. Here we go. Okay, so we've had a few questions here. I don't think you can see this on my screen. I'll just read you the question. So the first question was from Eric. Actually, Eric's left the meeting, but I'll read his questions out because I think they were answered. Can the Excel tab be sorted on demand? He's not on the call, so I can only guess at what he was asking. So I'm thinking that might mean, you know, in what order are the grouped tabs generated? This would be dictated by the order in which the document was bursted. So if I wanted them grouped Arizona then California, my bursting list would be Arizona, California. If I wanted California then Arizona, I would list California then Arizona. So I hope that answers that question. Eric also asked about support for BI41. We just covered that. Ken, thank you for adding CUID. I haven't had the chance to test it yet, but it sounds like it will meet our needs. This was actually inspired by Ken's group, and hopefully it's something that will you know, make platform migration or document migration outside of InfoBurst a bit easier. It makes perfect sense it's now part of the platform. Rochelle, this is a question. She just says, very cool, can't wait to use it. Excellent, excellent. Okay, let me move to the last one here. Kirk writes, will you provide a recorded version of this presentation for customers unable to attend at this time? Absolutely. We will be sending out one last notification. We'll give you a link to the website that you can access today's recording. So yes. Then the last question is from Keith, and he said, what is the latest status of the InfoBurst object migration tool? Let me just address that very quickly, because this is something that our development team is absolutely heads down with right now. So a few years back, folks over the years have asked us for the ability to move objects between InfoBurst environments. So I want to take a burst, let's say, and move it from development to production. And it's not an unreasonable expectation. Many enterprise products like business objects, I can move a Webl report from A to B, I can move a universe, that sort of thing. So over the last few years, we had been developing a tool, object migration tool, kind of a full client standalone tool that would let you do this. And it was something we worked on. It was not, in its final version, was not something we were happy with. We had several sites utilizing it and struggling with it. And so we took that knowledge and we've started over. And actually, we're in that development process now of what we're calling object promotion. This is going to be a very big feature. Our lead developer, John Wilcox, tells me this is the biggest undertaking since the development of the InfoBurst platform itself. And that's because, and many of you will appreciate, that moving objects in InfoBurst is not like moving objects in other enterprise products, right? Typically, I want to move one or two objects at a time. InfoBurst is different, right? Let's think of the typical burst, for example. Actually, I'll give you an example that I worked with just yesterday. One of our larger customers, their bursts, their typical bursts, are quite complex. So their documents, or their bursts, may have 20 reports, all with varying types of bursting, deliveries, destinations, and they might be using file lists for bursting and database queries for deliveries. They might be using other external objects like actions and events and static documents, you name it. So their typical burst, and I actually dug into the details of it, consists of no less than 20 unique objects. So when we say migrate a burst, an object, we're not moving just a burst. We're moving 20 dependent objects. So that's why this object promotion functionality has been a rather long time in the making, because we want to make it something that works, meaning I want to move a burst, let's move a burst, but also making sure that all the tools are available for you to correctly account for all of the burst dependencies, or the XDC dependencies, or the schedule dependencies, and make sure that when you move that complex object from development or stage to production, that it's going to work, meaning you got all of those dependencies right. We got our ODBC connections in place, we got our file share permissions, our firewall permissions, all those things, so that the promotion process is seamless. This is something that this is kind of a focus of the development team right now. I anticipate a first version of object promotion to be available in build 124, which, as I said, we're targeting for the end of January. And Keith, your site, and many others that have been asking for this will be kind of on the front lines. We'll be reaching out to you to be pilots for this tool to help us finalize the development of this thing. But I can say this is something that the dev group's taken on. They're very excited about it, and this is something that's coming rather soon. So as soon as more details are available, I'm hoping in the Build 123 release I can give you more details about 124 and object promotion. Okay, so that's the last of the questions. As always, if you have any follow-on questions from today's webinar, feel free to drop us a support call or just email us at the address there on your screen. And again, thank you all for attending today's Build 122 webinar. And as I said, you'll receive an update here in the next day or two with access to the recording of today's session. So again, thank you all, and have a nice weekend.